I want to revisit the New Jersey PACT rules again, but from a little bit different angle. One of the things that I have the most concern, and many others, reservations about the whole prospect of this, is the data that it was based on. And we understand it was based on the 2019 Rutgers that had a very, very extreme, over 5-foot sea level rise by the year 2100. And very few, I think it's an 83% likelihood that that won't be the case, more likely 0 to 2 feet. Now, the problem with that is, and we've had this happen before, where you may recall in 1989 when the UN came out with a panicked warning that by the year 2000, whole countries would be underwater. There was even a graphic printed that had big sections of Manhattan underwater by the year 2000. Clearly, it didn't happen, and it still hasn't happened 25 years later. So when people are, conditioned to be concerned about this panicked sort of doomsday prediction, and we're basing rules on it, that's where the concerns come in. So do you have any plans to maybe revisit this based on better data so we don't get these sort of extreme restrictions and rules that are looming right now?
There aren't extreme rules and restrictions that are looming. There are building things higher so that people don't get flooded out of their first floor apartments. And with respect to the silliness, quite frankly, the silliness being thrown around this state by those who would undermine the scientific consensus on climate change, it is shameful. Absolutely shameful. And with respect to these scientific studies in particular, this isn't some one-off, although it's being presented to you that way. It's not inconsistent with the science being done around the world. No, it's more granular. It's about us. By that I mean, the International Panel on Climate Change, the UN panel, has projections about national implications, global implications. These are studies specific to us in New Jersey, right? Because we have multiple problems, not the least of which is sea level rise, but also subsidence, and there is an interplay there. And to anyone that is suggesting that somehow the scientific the scientific analysis here is outdated, I think it's important to recognize that what this is based on is an analysis of conditions from a moderate scenario, not the lowest risk and certainly not the highest risk. That is 10 feet of sea level rise, right? That's our highest risk. From a high emissions scenario, right? The moderate emissions scenario assumes that we're going to be moving toward, as a state, a nation, and a world, the implementation of the Paris Accords. The president yanked us out. And we are not on track. Why? Last year, we exceeded the temperature as a planet that is that was set as the mark for maintaining our stability without absolutely horrific outcomes. This is not hyperbole. I've explained that everyone here is talking about flooding in their communities. Sea level is in fact rising. Just last week, new science came out about how the glaciers are melting faster than the science thought they would. This isn't 1989, and the science is better, it's stronger, it's more reliable. And for us to say somehow that we shouldn't build things higher when literally people were swept out of their first floor homes, I mean, it's unbelievable.
Hey, Commissioner, I understand your passion and everything, but let's just get back to the real rules here that are based on, let's say, just questionable data. That there's
it's not questionable.
A lot of folks
That's
do
not true, Assemblyman. It's false.
Okay, then the same folks in 1989 who said this is based on real data, it didn't pan out.
This is not 1989.
No kidding.
Look what's happening around the world.
And we have the benefit of hindsight now to see how faulty that was. Now let me just give you some examples of some of it's beyond just raising buildings, way beyond. You have a 3% limit in the inundation risk zones on development. That's a de facto no-build zone.
No, it's not. I'm happy to explain that offline. I know folks are trying to bring this in for a landing. I can see everybody's faces, but that's not true. And I can explain to you how it works.
Commissioner, just respectfully, these small shore towns do not have the luxury of 20-acre lots. They have small, very, very small lots.
Right.
3% on that won't get a birdhouse on there, no less.
I understand that, but our small shore towns are completely built out, and this does not apply to redevelopment on an existing lot.
But the redevelopment areas are not allowed to build in the same footprint.
That's not true. That's not true at all.
That's right from the rule proposals.
No, it is not.
Okay, we disagree on that, but this came right from your rule.
That you can't build in the same footprint?
No. Not in the same size footprint. It must be shrunken down to a certain percentage, and that's
not true.
That will hurt redevelopment, and that will hurt construction in those areas because some projects are not viable unless they're in the initial footprint.
I understand that. I'm a redevelopment lawyer. I understand, but that is not true. I understand that there are opponents to this, and quite honestly, I would be pissed at them for lying to you all.
Who?
I'm not going to name names.
I'm a former municipal official, so I understand of a town with 12 miles of shoreline that this would impact tremendously. Now, the problem is with a lot of the restrictions that are put in by these rules, it will devalue properties.
No.
You will see a flood, no pun intended, of tax appeals, and the municipalities will invariably lose most of them.
Tax appeals for what?
For devaluing properties.
Why? Properties that are already built that have homes on them?
Okay, let me give you an example. Yes, you answer your question.
That's an
Number
easy
two,
deny.
this is going to repeal the infill build rule.
Repeal the infill build
Right,
rule.
meaning that if there's a vacant lot straddling two existing buildings, it will be almost impossible to develop that.
That is not true. That is not true.
Is there a different New Jersey PACT rule that I'm looking at versus the one that you're speaking of?
I think there is a different New Jersey PACT rule that has been recited to many elected officials to scare the hell out of them, and it's wrong.
This is not just me. There's a lot of concerns out there among the builders
I understand.
and everything that this is going to.
There has been the same talking points that have been spread to every legislator, every local government, and every county government up and down the coast. The same misinformation.
But keep in mind, too, all of these towns have quotas for affordable housing that relies on a certain amount of density to be able to comply with. So this will have a ripple effect on trying to comply.
I know that that's what's being thrown out there, but again, it's being thrown out there. I mean, can't you see what's happening? It's being thrown out there by certain interest groups who are against anything being different than it is right this moment. At the same time, I'm going around this state and our residents are begging us to do more about flooding. And so then interest groups come to you and they say, well, this affordable housing that we really want to do, and we should do, and that people deserve, that's going to be undermined by this thing just to get you worked up. It's not true. And again, I will sit down, I will go through it all with you, and I will apologize for my frustration. But wow.
I just want to point something out, too. This is not just a matter of special interest groups. These are municipalities who have...
Yes, I understand, because they've been lied to by the same people.
This, have intimate knowledge of this. So if they're all so wrong and so misinterpreting these
It's not that they're misinterpreting. It's that there was a very deliberate campaign that constructed a narrative, sent that narrative to every local elected official because they knew if they got the elected officials scared and could sow a distrust of the DEP, your floodplain manager Who wants to help people? They knew that they would then get to you because your locals would be worked up.
Municipalities who have dealt in these areas for hundreds of years, they're not so easily duped by some sort of special interest with nefarious intentions. They live and breathe this, so they know it better than anywhere, these areas, what the rules will impact and what the result will be. You state that there's not going to be any devaluation of these properties in the IRZ or in these municipalities that are going to be impacted by this. No devaluation of those properties due to these rules?
There's no reason to believe that. There's no reason to believe that.
No reason to believe that
that would happen. There's no reason to believe that. Devaluation of property that exists because there are risks? I mean, do we think that the mortgage and finance industry is not awake to the risks of climate change? Do we not see what's happening in Florida with insurers pulling out of the state? It's not going to devalue property. And in fact, when the governor announced that we would be taking these things into consideration, we got a positive response from Moody's because we're making property more secure. We're making the investment more secure and protected. It is an asset-based regulatory reform in that way.